Alrighty. Now I am mindful of time, so I'm going to get us started and just keep letting people come in as we go. So welcome everyone. I'd like to start this event, which is our discussion on National Reconciliation Week with the theme Now More Than Ever. So I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging that I'm coming to you from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people, lands that were never ceded, and pay my respects to elders past and present. As well as any First Nations people joining us in the room here today. We've got quite a lot of registrations to join us today, so I always encourage people joining us to pop in the chat function their own acknowledgement of the lands that they're joining us from today. Often we have people joining from across Queensland, and for this event we may also have people from across Australia. I've got some wonderful speakers here today that I'll introduce in just a moment. But just as a little bit of housekeeping, do want to ask that you can keep your microphones on mute. We're hoping this is a really meaningful conversation that will, I think, challenge myself as an ally of First Nations people here and give us some ideas of what the meaning of Now More Than Ever is for this year. We wanted to ask if or at all possible for people to have their cameras on as a way to connect us all under the essence and meaning of reconciliation and joining together. So if you're able to do that, that would be a really great way to make this a meaningful conversation. We do have a Q&A function there that you should see at the top of your screen, as well as the chat line there. So we'll kind of guide through the conversation as we go and encourage you to put any questions into the Q&A and the chat, and I'll do my best to stay on top of that as we run through. I imagine an hour is nowhere near enough to have the depth of conversation we'll have today, but we'll do our best to stay on time. I'm joined by a wonderful group of people here today. I have Shannon Thorne as the National Manager for Mission Australia, Murray Benton, the Sector Capacity Lead from Queensland Shelter, who also sits on the QATSICPP Child Death Review Board, and the wonderful Rachel Benton, Program Manager of STAR and Mission Australia. I do want to acknowledge that we had some other speakers that unfortunately had to step away at the last minute. It's obviously a very busy week amongst a very busy year, but did want to acknowledge we had two other speakers that were First Nations women that were joining us today, and recognise that their voice and that gendered voice from this conversation would be really meaningful. So lastly, just in terms of the structure, we do have a bit of a process to go through today, but ultimately we want it to be, again, a meaningful conversation. So we'll kind of dance with the flow of where we go and see if I can move us along that way. So without further ado,
well, I can't see you, my line of sight.
I'll just do another plug to remind people to pop their microphones on mute if they can, please. Use the chat function if you do have any comments there. And if you're able to have your camera on, that's a lovely way for us to connect. To start us off, I'm going to throw a question to our wonderful three panel members. Really starting with, what does Reconciliation Week mean to you? And particularly the theme of this year of Now More Than Ever. What does that mean for you and your experience? I'm open for any three of you to jump in and get us started.
I'm happy to jump in. I was just looking at you two going, I wonder who put their hand up. And Ryan, I might just start just by doing a bit of an intro myself too, if that's okay. And just quickly, can I have some thumbs up? Can everyone hear my audio? Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. So I too would just like to extend that acknowledgement from Ryan, just to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people here in beautiful Meanjin, Brisbane, which is where I now call home, and extend that to all the various areas and communities in which everybody here is dialing in from today. And also just make note that this land is the traditional land of First Nations people, and that sovereignty was never ceded. I really want to give a shout out to Shannon and Rachel, our other two presenters today, for showing an incredible amount of strength and leading these conversations with us. And a lot of First Nations people here will know that there's an incredible weight and responsibility that can come with these opportunities. And as great as it is to be able to have these discussions, when we have things like Reconciliation Week, sometimes that can weigh heavier on some more than others. And I had a really great conversation with our group yesterday and felt really inspired, and just wanted to really give them a moment of thanks for today. To Ryan and QCOS, everybody at QCOS, I really just want to acknowledge their work around First Nations justice, human rights, and really being a significant ally and pillar for the work here in Queensland that flows on to all of us. And further, just QATSICPP, which is our state peak body for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child protection and family support services, who are soon to become our youth justice peak here in Queensland. I know that originally they were trying to attend here today, and we know how significant their work for our people is, but also now all youth in Queensland, and just think that's really important. So my name is Murray Benton. I'm an Aboriginal Barkindji Koori man from Central West New South Wales. I was born in Mudgee, which is a little country town along the Cudgegong River Valley. I work with Q Shelter, which is Queensland's peak body working towards solutions for homelessness and housing. And as Ryan said, I also sit on the Child Death Review Board with the Queensland Family and Child Commission. So today my reflections will involve my capacity in a few of those roles, but also a lot around my personal lived experience. And before working in these roles, I was based in Gympie on Gubbi Gubbi country for 11 years, and I was the manager of the Crisis Youth Service up there, so really specialising in that specialist homelessness and dignity services, youth services, domestic and family violence services, and refuge space, and a few other things. So for
That's
me,
okay.
Ryan, I'll just see, we've just got somebody's audio going, so I'll just wait a moment for them to see if we're good. Perfect. So for me, Ryan, and for everybody, what does reconciliation mean for me? And I think in terms of now more than ever this year, to be really honest, I've really struggled with this question, and it's something every year we reflect and ask ourselves, what does reconciliation mean? And I think we all know the outcome and how devastating it was with our referendum last year, and the incredible weight and excessive racism that we've seen escalate for our people since. And so I guess I had to sum up my thoughts on reconciliation, and now more than ever, in sort of a few words. And so for me, really, it's education, understanding, bold allyship, and connection and belonging. And I'll sort of leave it there to give our other speakers a chance to introduce themselves and have a bit of a chat too, but I'll loop back to why education, understanding, bold allyship, and connection and belonging are really important to me, especially as we move forward into the Truth and Treaty process here in Queensland, and all that will be our work moving forward. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Murray, brother. Ryan, thanks for the question. I'll introduce myself. My name is Shannon Thorne. I'm a proud Gamilaroi and Wiradjuri man. In my language, I'll say Yama, Yamanda, Yamagaru, Waga, Ndagan, Bawa, Malaya. And in my father's language, Gamilaroi language, this means hello, welcome, aunties, uncle, brothers, sisters, and friends. In my acknowledgement of country, I want to pay my respects to Burumata Gunitokun and Biame. So what I'm saying is Biame is our God, and Burumata Gunitokun is Mother Earth is the big boss. Mother Earth will always own us. I want to acknowledge my beautiful parents. Danny was born and raised on the mission in Walgett. My mother was born and raised on the mission in Wellington. Both of my parents have raised nearly 300 foster children. I'm a proud father myself. I'm a proud foster father myself, and I'm a proud ally of both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. I am the National Manager for Mission Australia. I'm extremely honoured and grateful to be on the line today. I'm extremely honoured and grateful and very thankful to be working for Mission Australia. But I'm also very honoured, to be here today and to sit and be in your presence, and for you allowing the time to be with us for National Reconciliation Week, as it is a massive week for us. Also, in my acknowledgement of country, I also want to acknowledge our old people, as for they laid the foundation for us to be where we are today. Our old people say they walked so we can drive, so our children can fly. We're all in that vehicle together to help our children take off. I want to acknowledge my beautiful non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters on the line, but also I want to acknowledge the purpose why we're here, and it is more now than ever. The question to me, more now than ever, and what does Reconciliation Week mean to me? Look, from a personal perspective, I personally feel that we're in a pandemic at the moment when it comes to racism. To give an example of how serious it is for me at the moment, I can't even post my children on one of my social media platforms because of the racism that we're a targeted attack of. more now than ever, I think, is exactly that. For me, National Reconciliation Week and more now than ever, the theme should be less words and more actions. For me, personally, that's my personal opinion. My approach to today's society, and it always has been since I was born, is that nobody can be held responsible for yesterday, but we've all got a part to play in tomorrow. And more now than ever, it's really important that we all play our part in tomorrow to create better futures for absolutely everybody. So for me, that's National Reconciliation Week. National Reconciliation Week is about Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people coming together, reflecting on our victories, but also holding each other accountable to the truths and what needs to happen to better tomorrow. Rachel?
Thank you. I also wanted to begin today by acknowledging the Mulluridgee people. They're the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm speaking from today, and wanted to pay my respects to the elders past and present. And I also extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are here today joining us. Thank you, everyone. I'm a proud ally for our First Nations people, and I'm a second generation born Australian. So I have the privilege of working on Mulluridgee country with young people and their families in a youth justice funded program. I'll speak more to that a little bit later. But to answer Ryan's question, we had a bit of a discussion around it yesterday, but what the tagline, I guess, of now more than ever means to me is that we need action rather than words. There's a lot of conversations around what we need to do, what we should be doing, what has to happen. But we need to see action. So my response to that, in short, is action, not words.
Wonderful. Thanks to you all. A reminder to everyone, if there are any comments or questions that you want to throw into the chat or the Q&A as we go through this conversation, I'll keep an eye on those. So thank you to our wonderful presenters. It's a real honour to be here today hosting this conversation with you. I think we had a conversation or a few in the lead up to this around that theme of now more than ever, and that I think the two sides to that coin of really identifying the urgency, but then feeling that frustration and pain in terms of the experiences and what we know of the trauma that a lot of particularly First Nations young people are going through today and for a long time now. I did want to maybe move the conversation, and please, for the presenters, feel free to look back to any of the comments you made there, particularly those principles you mentioned, Murray. But one part of the conversation we had in terms of now more than ever, and in terms of particularly the experience of young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, is that there is so much evidence of what needs to happen. There's so much that we know around the urgency of change. I wanted to first start with referencing one of the recommendations out of the QFCC Child Death Review Board reports that really talks about improving the research on the needs of First Nations communities. So we have, I think, Murray, you'll be able to say it far more eloquently than I can, but recognising that First Nations Australians are some of the most over-researched populations in the world. So we have a lot of evidence, we do a lot of research, but it's often or primarily through a Western lens. Can you explain that recommendation from the board there and what it looks like to improve that research and where we can go to find that better inclusion of First Nations communities in the process?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And I think too as well, what'll be really good, I'm happy and post this, Ryan, if we can send a link out. It is on the QFCC website, this report, and it'll go kind of into more of the, I guess, specifics. But I guess, like you've said, a lot of evidence will show that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are really heavily researched and probably the most researched people culture in the world in terms of what's been captured in the past. I think the thing that's really interesting around this is we can see over the generations, and as much as we've had a lot of research and data, there's been really limited to no corresponding benefits or improvements for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And if we talk about youth justice and we look at the statistics and data around the impacts, that there speaks for itself. And so research methodologies and practices often derive from Western concepts, like you've said. So what that essentially can mean as well is that researchers or the research can remain in control, and I guess the depth of that and who's managing the data and gathering the analysis work are westernised. And so I guess my answer to this would be that research being led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it allows that determination element to come into play, but also to really understand the purpose and the objectives of the research, how it progresses, what the outcomes and benefits could be for Aboriginal children. In this conversation, we're talking about youth justice, but I guess more broadly, young people, their families and communities. And so I think from a lot of the research that's been done, a part of that recommendation is to really highlight that determination and why are we collecting that data, and have we collected that data in the past in a way that's actually as appropriate and relevant for First Nations people. And so that recommendation really is around being able to create opportunities for that research and data to be led by First Nations organisations and communities, because like we've all seen and we know what works for us. But there's a really thorough kind of analysis part within that report that everyone can have a read of as well.
Thanks, Murray. And yeah, we'll send that out as well as we discuss some of the other resources, including the documentary Incarceration Nation, which I assume some of you would have seen before, but is a particularly sobering film to watch in terms of just the urgency of the current situation we're in and the crisis. Shannon, I might see if you have any commentary on that, and then Rachel, I might throw to you in terms of your program and some of the experiences you have up there.
I guess just my commentary overall when it talks to data, research and evidence is that, I mean, how much more data, evidence and research is needed? First and foremost, we know the injustices, we know we're real. And for us, this is real, like this is personal for us because, you know, myself, so many Aboriginal people could easily be a statistic. I'm not saying others couldn't. I'm just speaking on behalf of myself as an Aboriginal person and as a proud Aboriginal person. And I think a lot of the data always, you know, reflects on our injustices. It always makes us work from a cultural deficit, not a cultural strength. And it always highlights what we need to improve on as First Nations people versus the other way around. Like, why don't we ever talk about the good we do? The data is always captured from that negative perspective and or, you know, from the psychosocial issues attached to the vulnerable and disadvantaged communities and so forth. And that's always highlighted to the wider community, which in return only causes further separation and so forth, in my opinion. I think if we're going to create data, I think first and foremost, we've got to work out why, what we're going to do with that data, and more importantly, how can we create change from that data? That's no disrespect to any of the data that is captured and or understand the importance to it. But the reality is, how much more data do we need? How much money are we pouring into data? Why don't we pour money into change? Why don't we pour money into accountability, truth, and more importantly, cohesion and coming together and collectiveness? That's just my general overview statement with that. I've worked in the industry for a while. My previous role as the Aboriginal advocate for all children and young people in New South Wales, that's basically what my role was, that stuff. And no disrespect to that role and no disrespect to any advocates, commissioners or guardians. But how do we get to a point where we can create change and systemic change? And how do we get to a point where communities and individuals can feel and see that change? We've got the data, we've got the evidence, but now it's time to advocate for change.
Thank you, Shannon. I think I'll come back to that in just a moment. I do just want to see, Rachel, your thoughts on that kind of research and evaluation, and particularly highlighting the impact of the programs that you oversee in your region. And I'd love to hear if you can comment as well on any processes you know of, or the need for including the voices of young people in that process in terms of their participation in this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So just a little bit of background about my program. So my program is a youth justice funded program. So we're funded under the Youth Offender Support Service funding. So our program, we refer to it as STAR affectionately, but what that acronym stands for is Strong Together and Resilient. And that's really what we're trying to do with our young people that are within our program. So the majority of the young people that we work with, I will call them kids because I feel like young people is really a bit stale and a bit official. So when I say my kids, I'm talking about the young people that I work with. So our funding is to work with young people from the ages of 8 to 17 that are in our catchment area that are either within the youth justice system or at risk of entering the system. And the way that the program has developed, we've ended up working predominantly with the serious repeat offender kids. So all of our young people that are currently within our program and that have been within the program for the last 5 years that we've been running have all been Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander young people. So as part of the program, we do intensive case management, cultural mentoring and therapeutic group work. We already know, and again, this is going back to all the data and all the statistics and everything, we already know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people are overrepresented in the youth justice system. And working with the kids that are in the youth justice system, they come from a space of reaction to offending and antisocial behaviours rather than the early intervention and addressing the root causes, which is what we lean into. And we focus more on working with the kids' strengths and, you know, focusing on what's going to happen in the future as opposed to what's already happened in their offending behaviour. So we know that our young people are facing huge amounts of barriers and, you know, unfortunately for some of our kids, it's pretty much every single box that they're ticking, but we are seeing a lot of domestic and family violence, alcohol and other drugs and misuse, substance misuse, mental health issues, trauma. We're seeing a really dramatic rise of FASD diagnosis in our young people that are within the youth justice system, and there's a lot of studies that have come out of Northern Territory about that, which I would recommend for everyone to read up about. But, you know, overcrowding in homes, homelessness, all of these things. And unfortunately, with the young people that I'm working with at the moment, those kids are ticking pretty much every single box. So when we're looking at the protective factors that are missing for these kids, what's also coming up often is their disconnection to their culture and their identity. And a lot of our kids that we work with, they don't have the strong cultural knowledge. And there's a real deficit in their understanding of their own culture and their identity. So, you know, if you don't know who you are or where you come from, they're trying to find the sense of belonging in, you know, unhealthy or not pro-social ways. So, you know, when we look at what our service is going to deliver and how we're going to create these changes with our young people, we do the simplest thing, we ask. Because, you know, like we've said over and over, they know best. They know what they need. They know what they want. They know what they, you know, they know what they're lacking and they know where they need that support. So we asked, we yarned with our kids, we listened to their answers, and then the biggest thing is we actioned it. So from that, we created our pilot program of a project called Deadly Me. And that's a cultural identity and connection program. So we basically reached out to our elders in the community and linked in with them to help us to develop this program and also deliver this program and facilitate the program with our young people. So there's several sessions. So it's a 16-week program and, you know, each session focuses on a different thing. So, you know, for example, the first session was just talking to them about who they are and what do they know? What do they know about their history? What do they know about their families, who their mob are, you know, where they're from and all that sort of stuff. So, and then other sessions would be leaning into like cultural protocols, law LAU versus law LORE, and taking them out to on-country excursions and like sacred sites, learning language, names for things, and, you know, going out on country with traditional owners and leaning into traditional ways of doing things. So we took some kids out to Injilinji and we did a traditional spear fishing, and then we cooked up some mud crabs and had them with some damper, which was amazing. But I think the biggest thing is that we find with our young people that are in our system and that are referred to our program is that we have a lot of trouble with engagement because a lot of the times the kids are too slack as we're here quite often. But that particular program, when we ran that had the highest engagement of any program that we've ever run. It's had the highest engagement of any program that Youth Justice Service Centre has ever run. And there's like a statistic that I'm very proud of and I will crow about it till the cows come home. But with all of the kids that we had in that program that were actively engaged, 90% of those kids did not reoffend. And that's just, I mean, it just speaks for itself. Like we had kids coming up to us and, you know, Auntie, where are we going next week? And, you know, Uncle, what are we going to do? Like, where are we going? Like all this sort of stuff. But what the most powerful thing was is that we just saw kids connecting to their country, and we saw them connecting to their families, and even just giving them that space to ask the courage to ask those questions. Because what we found, a lot of the kids were like, oh, no, too shame. I don't want to ask mum or dad that, you know, or, you know, and we'd have the elders there going, oh, I know who your mom is. Did you know so-and-so is your auntie? And then it brings to them connections within the community. And these people are their relatives and kin that they didn't even know. So it just provides them more safe people for them to connect with within the community. But I just wanted to share a quote that we had from a young person when we were on Injilinji. And he actually said to us, he said, oh, I only found out yesterday that this is my dad's country. And when we were walking through the mangroves, he's like, feel this salt water. He's like, I feel clean, I feel healed. And just seeing in his eyes, like you can see in these kids' eyes, the change when they're out on country. You can see the healing. It's really, really powerful. And it's really beautiful. So I guess the biggest thing that we take from that is that these programs that listen to our First Nations young people and actually respond and action to what they need is better outcomes for our young people, better outcomes for our community, better outcomes for our family. And that's where our funding needs to go on. And it's leading into the Raise the Age campaign where, you know, we've said numerous times that these support programs and early intervention programs are more effective in keeping our communities and our young people safe and reducing offending. So rather than putting them in detention. And the other thing that it solidifies is that there's proof in the proof is that there's value in learning from each other and our elders. And I guess it really ties in nicely with the message of, you know, National Reconciliation Week and this now more than ever, because it's the action that and us walking the talk that, you know, is making these things happen for our young people. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. There is a question in there that I'll ask in just a moment, but I do just want to see Murray and Shannon if you have any thoughts on that conversation, and I guess that importance of, you know, we're in Rachel's conversation spoke a bit about you know, prevention, root causes, and her program is kind of responding to young people or kids in the current system. But I'm curious if you have any response to what Rachel was talking about, and particularly around that importance of connection to culture and country as part of reconnecting that identity and pride that they have in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, look, sorry, Murray, brother, to go first. I think, you know, I was on my father's country just 2 weeks ago, and, you know, as a grown man, I broke down and got emotional. That's what country means to us. And the country means everything to children and everybody. Like I said, Burumata Gunitakun, Mother Earth is the big boss. I think if we're all allies of children, we all advocate for children, I think the biggest thing we can do is never assume, we must always ask. And that sounds like what Rachel's done here. I know with my advocacy with absolutely everybody, I will never assume, I will always ask. That's including my own children, that's including absolutely everybody. I think we should always ask versus assuming, because children always want to advocate for what they think is right. Obviously, if it's within limits, let's try and elevate that. Let's try and make it work, and let's try and advocate for what children want versus assuming what they want, is the only thing I'll add to that. But obviously, Rachel, great work to you and the team. We work for the same organisation. I didn't first time, yeah, but awesome. Thank you. Murray, brother?
Yeah, look, I just firstly, Rach, that's amazing, and just the outcomes. I guess it's really good. That's the stuff, I guess, you know, Shannon, too, even when you mentioned before about, you know, we don't celebrate the good stuff enough, or the data reflects what it does, which positions us not in a great way. I mean, that's the stuff that's really, yeah, kind of flips that on its head. And I guess, too, if we're talking, and then a little bit more, Shannon, about what you just said around advocating for our children, and if I sort of reflect on the work that we do at the Child Death Review Board, and I don't want to sort of get too into statistics statistics and stuff either, but I guess one impactful thing that I can say around some of the stuff we're talking about is in the financial year, so last financial year, so 2022 to 2023, there'd been 60 cases reviewed by the Child Death Review Board in Queensland. And so essentially, just to give people a quick overview of what the reviews are about, so we conduct systematic reviews following the death of a child that's been connected to the child protection system, which is under Part 3A of the Family and Child Commission Act 2014. And so what these reviews do are provide opportunities to improve the child protection system, which in turn will prevent future deaths. So across agency information, research and data, we look at making system-wide findings and recommendations more for systemic improvements, which will then prevent those deaths moving forward. And so out of the last financial year, there was 72 children that had died in Queensland that had been in contact with the child protection system within 12 months of their end of life outcome. The board were able to assess 60 of those, and out of the 60 that were reviewed in that time, 47% of those are First Nations children.
That is so good.
And so when you look at the fact that we make up First Nations people make up nearly 4% of Australia's population, and nearly half of our population are under the age of 25, when I then look at a statistic where 47% of the cases that we review, if somebody just got their mic on, unless they're agreeing with me, which is amazing because it's giving me more confidence. But so essentially what I'm trying to say is when I look at a statistic like that, and nearly half of the cases that we are reviewing at the moment are our Black babies and youth, very well knowing how that system intersects with youth justice, and how they then graduate from youth justice into adult detention. And they're already being placed in that now. Essentially, the system's geared to fail our people. And that's really important for me when we're talking around our history. And I'll wait for you, Brian, until you want me to touch base on that Incarceration Nation film. But in terms of education and those sort of few things I was saying before, this kind of really rolls into that because, while it's important to not get too down into the weeds with data, there is some really bold data and statistics that show us how significant our current landscape is. And so now more than ever, that 47% needs to decline. You know, we've got half of our people under the age of 25, and they're the fastest dying children that are coming into contact with the system here in our state. And so I'll leave that there. But I guess just in terms of Shannon's advocacy and Rachel, what your service is doing, that's incredible, because what that stuff's actually doing is keeping that 47% from increasing to beyond 50%, which the board is forecasting for that statistic to climb, which for me as a First Nations person on that board is really devastating and quite hard to digest, but also really important work. So thanks, Ryan. I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. I think really important to highlight that. And I think I might move to, if you're able to talk about Incarceration Nation, because I do think I might move the conversation to a bit around that education piece about understanding what's going on. And, in the context of, from our conversations earlier this week, your own experiences of racism and the aftermath of the referendum last year. So I think perhaps I can ask around that education, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the documentary as part of that. And then I might move to, from education, what kind of action we can take there. I think there's been some really nice commentary around that. We ask, we listen, we action. But I'd love to, I assume with us in the room today, a lot of non-Indigenous allies. And I'd love to, after the education piece, move to what action can we take? What can we do around being able to listen better and move on? And Kelly, I haven't forgotten your question there, but I'll get to that in a sec. So Murray, please continue in terms of that education piece.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, so two things. Can everyone just with their digital hand just raise their hand if they've seen Incarceration Nation, just to give me a bit of an idea? And also, cool. 7. Okay, cool. So we've got some people here. That's great. I would really love, I'll give just a bit of a quick summary of this, but I would love for you, the people that have seen it, to just put in the chat just in a few words, or even just in a reflection, what you thought about viewing it, because I just really like for that to be shared with everybody else here. But essentially, Incarceration Nation was released in 2021, and so it was directed by Dean Gibson in collaboration with 12 other incredible people in his direct team, and that then flowed out more broadly. But essentially what the film, it's a 90-minute documentary that exposes systematic injustices and oppression for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here in Australia. And so it connects historical legislation and government intervention to the trauma and disadvantage experienced by First Nations Australians, which that includes child removals and the stolen generation, stolen wages, the denial of education, over-policing, racism and systemic bias. And I guess a part of that is what it does really beautifully, as confronting as the film is that it really can highlight just how devastating the impact of over-incarceration of First Nations people really is. And obviously the topic in discussion today is around youth justice. And so when we're talking about one of the biggest human rights issues, and we reflect on the Raise the Age campaign, for example, what's really beautiful about this film is the tragedy in it and how it can showcase the injustices, but also the resilience in a way that shows our ongoing struggles now, but kind of linking it back to colonisation. And respectfully, we've come such a long way. And so I say this, with genuine respect, but when we look at the justice system and incarceration and the police system, fundamentally our original legislation was built on the position of eradicating our people, the slaughtering, the deaths and complete removal of us. And so, yes, we've survived, and we've in a way thrived through a lot of that. Because we've had to, but I think the way that they've been able to deliver it so rawly is really powerful. And so I think when I was talking at the start about what does Reconciliation Week mean to me, and a few of those things, education is absolutely the forefront, but I was thinking what's something that we could bring to this discussion for everybody, for those that may not have seen something that's really educational but really impactful. This would be the film that I would love everybody to view, and that then really, I guess, lands more into that bold allyship. And I don't think anybody here would be able to watch this film. I cried this week. I had my mum sitting next to me who's she's had a really challenging story, like most First Nations people, and she used to work in the prison system when she was young because she wanted to make a change. And sort of seeing her tears this week and how I feel about it, and so many others, it's really to sit back through that film, do some self-care. It can be pretty brutal, I guess, but one thing that Joshua Creamer said this week, Karina Hogan and a few others, that, we watch this film, we really need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable now. And we exactly what Shannon was saying before, and Rach too. And, Ryan, you've made those comments too around there's a lot of lip service, a lot of talk going, a lot of words, and that's great. I'm all here for a good yarn too and whatever else, but when we actually drill down to it, we can't have action if we don't have education, and we're 4% of the population trying to tell our story to a very diverse community across Australia now. And so my message would be, please watch that film, cry if it makes you cry, lean on friends and family, share the stories, and then be bold in your allyship with us to really bring home what reconciliation means. Because when we talk about youth justice and our babies, and even what's happened here with our government with removing detention as a last resort, that was the most devastating thing for me when it comes to data and looking at our story, because that's just opening the gate for what we've been fighting so hard to work through to continue to be our reality. And so I'll leave that there, but I hope that gives some people some good perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. I think that's a wonderful invitation for everyone here to, if you haven't watched that film, to watch it. I guarantee you'll be in tears. I don't think there's anyone in the world that could watch that and not cry. And I think it is heavily confronting, which I know for myself, it was, I think the confrontation that I needed, that really sobering reminder of the actual, as Marian's put in there, around the actual people and stories that are there. I think we all see the data, numbers are, have a purpose, but these are individual humans within individual families and kinship networks, and it really drives that home. I wanted to, mindful of time, and please everyone, if there are questions you want to throw into the chat or the Q&A, please do. But I am keen to try and unpack a bit of what action can be taken here. I think for myself personally and for QCOS, Rachel mentioned we lead the Raise the Age campaign, and we do quite a lot of work in advocating around investing in particularly community-controlled community programs as an alternative to the justice system. That is a very frustrating system to be trying to reform. You know, Murray mentioned some of the recent announcements and changes where it feels like, in my personal opinion, we're moving in the wrong direction. But what also can we do as people in this room today and others that may watch it outside of this? What can we do to try and address this? We've touched on the urgency. I think we all have our own experience or confrontation in really being seeing the desperate need for change, and we touched on what more do we need. I guess I'm curious to unpack that. What can be done within advocacy, within supporting organisations, within trying to engage with communities, within as individuals in our own communities? Do you have any thoughts on what we can take away from today as a step in the right direction?
Yeah, can I go first? Look, for me, I have a responsibility in this as well as a proud Aboriginal person. If we're talking about more now than ever, we're talking about reconciliation. I have a responsibility in this as well. Despite the injustices that we have to unfortunately endure, I have a responsibility to allow a cultural safe space for my non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters to connect and come on a journey with us as well. I must acknowledge that, and I respect that. I have the utmost respect for absolutely everybody. I don't hold on to negative energy, and I do not hold everybody accountable to the way sometimes I get treated just for being Aboriginal in today's society. I have a responsibility in this as well. My non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters should have a responsibility to come and walk and talk with us as well. I think if we're talking about advocacy, we're talking about change, then we must do that whilst we're not waiting for an issue to arise. So let's be productive. Let's be, proactive, not reactive. Not everything needs to have an agenda. Not everything needs to be at the forefront of the injustices all the time for us to react. Why can't we just sit and talk with each other? Why does everything have to be a reactive purposes versus just a general purposes in life? I mean, our people, that's what we thrive on. We thrive on conversations. We thrive on togetherness. That's our narrative. That's our connection. That's the way we've lived, right? And the reason why sometimes it's hard for our non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters to come into our communities and come in to walk and talk with us is because we're always waiting for an issue. We're always waiting for a crisis. We're always waiting for an issue to arise versus just coming and walking and talking with us. So my best advice is, be proactive with this stuff. Sometimes, the best conversations happen over a cup of tea. Sometimes the best conversations happen at the gym. Sometimes relationships are built in places we never expected, right? And sometimes that's what we need to do if we want to create change. But I also have a responsibility in that as well to allow non-Aboriginal people to approach me to have those conversations. So for me, I think if we're talking about advocacy, we're talking about change. That's what stands out to me. I'm as proud as punch to be Aboriginal, but the biggest thing that I'm most proud of is that despite what I go through as a dark man in today's society and all the issues that I have to unfortunately face, I'm still standing here with my arms open saying, walk with me, despite who you are. And I'm extremely proud of that, because when I talk about advocacy, I know I'm not talking about children that are in today's society. I'm talking about children that aren't even born. And that's my role. That's my obligation. And that's my responsibility. So when we talk about advocacy, when we talk about change, let's do it so it's not scripted. Let's do it so that it's raw. Let's do it so that it's authentic. And let's do it so that it's real. And let's create allies to go on a journey together. That's my approach. That's my thoughts. And furthermore to that too, I am mindful that there's 15 minutes to go. And sorry, Rachel and Murray, I don't want to sort of shut you down here, but I have a responsibility in this as well. And I would love for people to, bring themselves off mute and ask us questions direct. That's our responsibility as Aboriginal people, to create this space, to have a yarn, to walk and talk together. Like, nobody can be held responsible for yesterday. We know that. I know that. That's my mindset. But we can all be held accountable to tomorrow. And unless we create that space, then there is no tomorrow.
I'll have a cuppa with you any day, Shannon.
As long as you're shouting, brother, then I'm there. That's, like our culture is so rich, it's so alive. I believe, and this is just because I've grown up with Aboriginal family all around me, like our humour is second to none. Like, we're just idiots. Like, we love it. But, we don't focus on that. It's always the sad and down stuff. But bring that stuff to the table as well, and then we'll see some change. We'll see some light. That's advocacy. That's change, and it's changing from a different perspective. And, I could sit here and tell you absolutely all the horrific stories that happened to me, but it won't achieve anything. I want to focus on what we can achieve, and I want to focus on that as a collective, and I want to focus on the strength base. That's my thoughts. Carol, thank you for that. We all have a responsibility to tomorrow. Absolutely. In saying that, does anybody want to come off mute and ask myself and Murray a question? And I don't know if there's any other Aboriginal people online, but I'm happy to be vulnerable right now, and I'm happy to be open, and I'm happy to be asked anything. If I can't answer it, I'll quickly refer to Murray. That's all good. Chuck him under the bus. But if not, brother Ryan, happy to sort of jump back to you, or Murray and Rachel if you wanted to add to that. But just know that when I say this stuff, I mean it. Like, for me as an Aboriginal person, and that's our objective at Mission Australia. We want to create allyships. I create a cultural safe space where we get together with our non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters, and there's no agenda. The reason why there's no agenda is because culture is everybody's responsibility. And if you put an agenda to that, then you're taking out responsibility, because we are the responsibility.
Beautifully said, Shannon. I think the invitation is there for people to jump in if you do want to take yourself off mute and share the vulnerability.
Yeah, maybe if somebody just wants to raise their hand, because I'll just go, just so we're not sort of sitting in silence, but please jump in at any point. I think for me, I kind of look at, in terms of now more than ever, the establishment of the Truth-Telling and Healing Inquiry here in Queensland. We've obviously, a lot of us have been tracking what's happening in Victoria with the Uruk work. I think for me, what I heard this week is that this next process is really gearing up to hear from our elders and our old people. A lot of them won't be here within the next 10 years, and it's a really critical time. And I think this process really, and people might have their different views and opinions, but for me, this process is exactly what Shannon was just saying around. It's not just an opportunity for people to be heard. We need First Nations people to be heard. We need non-First Nations people to be heard, and the government also needs to come along the journey. And so my thoughts would be, if you're an organisation that has a member base or has a client base that are First Nations, how can you as an entity, as an organisation, actually add value to that inquiry process, to your submission work? How can you be a part of telling the story of the work that you're doing based off the people that you're supporting? I think that's really critical to be a part of that process, especially larger organisations like Q Shelter, where we have a large member base. It's been really good to reflect on that, going, what's our story? We're not a First Nations-led organisation, but what's our story and a part of this journey? But more so to that, who in your networks do you know that is a First Nations person? Do you have any uncles, aunties, brothers, sisters, people that maybe don't have, and this isn't just First Nations, this could be your non-First Nations brothers and sisters too, to go, who might want to go and do a submission, or who might want to be heard, but do they have the right supports to go with them? Can you go and sit with them and listen? Would your workplace support you for some cultural training and development to take a day and go and sit down there when the inquiry is happening? I think we need to be really inquisitive and really open to this incredible opportunity that Queensland has around this truth process, and we all can play a part, big or small, in that, whether you're an entity, organisation, individual. It could be you and a friend, go and have that cuppa in the morning, but they go and sit down there at Parliament or wherever they're hosting it, and sitting there for half a day, and then bring that back to your workplace and go, this is what we heard. I think that's a really incredible chance. So I guess for me, that would be the other thing outside of what Shannon said with his great suggestions. And, you know, we are arms wide open, walk with us, but also to let us walk with you, but help lead in some of that as well, and be inquisitive with this process, because the more inquisitive and the more allies are a part of it, the bigger the chance for us to actually have it stay and have our stories heard and be captured before we lose our older generation. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think the invitation's still there if people are wanting to share in the vulnerability. I'm going to jump in, Shannon, because I know that there's some people there saying they'd love to have a chat to you outside of it. And it is a vulnerable position in front of so many people here in a webinar. But there was something that you mentioned there that made me think of my own family, where my mother's been on a bit of a journey in terms of connecting with Benarawa Community Development Association, which is here in Brisbane, and I think I think prompted by some of that truth-telling narrative, and really there was a comment there around the really inspiring beauty of Indigenous culture, that it was really positively focused around learning and sharing and understanding that outside of the deficit focus that a lot of what we hear is. I don't say that to dismiss any of the you know, trauma and horror of what people are experiencing, but I did just want to shine the light back on that comment about the real wonder and beauty and humour of connecting with your First Nations local community. And I wonder if that's something that people can take with them in terms of looking in your own backyard and connecting with those organisations and finding where those people are, and having some of that local connection. I think as QCOS, and I assume most of the people here come from community organisations where we do probably have a bit of an organisational lens in some of this work, but certainly what I'm hearing and hoping to take from today is what I can do as an individual within my own community to connect and learn from there.
Absolutely, brother. Cultural neglect is cultural abuse. You know, any neglect can be a form of abuse. If you see something, you do something. And, you know, the challenge that I like to set everybody is try not to work from a deficit, work from a strength. So if we're going in communities, we're collating data, are we working our people's strengths as well? Like, is there any strength-based tools that we're working with? Some of the communities that I've had the absolute pleasure of travelling, I've sat with many TOs across our country, both in this role and previous roles, and personally. And I can assure you, like, some of these communities are heavily viewed on the news as very vulnerable and disadvantaged communities, and they absolutely are. But I've never felt so more culturally connected at the same time. But we don't focus on that. We focus on the injustices. So I'm just like, I guess sometimes to create change, you've got to flip that narrative. I'm not saying you ignore it and it's not there. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But we've known it's been there for a long, long time, and unfortunately it's only grown at a rapid pace. So we have to try something different. We have to have the mindset that, you know, if our intentions are right and the delivery is wrong, that's okay as well. Because we're humans, we'll make mistakes, but the reality is we've got to create the space to come back together, you know, and resettle and go again. As a proud Aboriginal person, I have a heavy responsibility for the betterment of my people, and I have to have a clear mind and I have to have a good mind. And that's my responsibility. And my responsibility is, like Murray was saying, just to create that space for us to go on a journey together.
Yeah, thank you so much. I might just circle back. There was a question, Rachel, as you were telling us of the wonderful work that you do in your community each and every day. If there are any, anything people can access around that, any training, anything I guess the room can take today in terms of what they can apply into their, like I'm clicking back into organisational thinking, but well, if there's, you know, being able to take those examples, learn from them and apply them moving forward.
I guess I could talk to, you know, the process that, or, you know, what we did to sort of create Deadly Me. As I said, the initial run was just a pilot program to just see what works and what hasn't. And obviously it's worked really well. And we've applied for further funding to make it a standalone program. But I guess we've leaned on a resource, which is a book called My Deadly Book About Me. And if you Google that, you'll be able to see it. It's a great little, it's a great book because it has lots of activities and resources and task sheets and stuff. But what we found is as soon as we pull out that book, a lot of our kids just went, nope. But I guess the biggest thing in developing the program itself is that we kind of used that book as like the initial resource, and that kind of sparked the idea because I was like, wow, this is great. But the biggest importance for it is to get out and to yarn to the community and make those connections with traditional owners, elders, and basically just talk to everybody and build those connections, build those relationships. And it actually ended up for us with, focusing on those relationships that people were coming to us and asking us if they could come and do something with the program. We've had kids that aren't even in youth justice try and self-refer into our program just so we can do it. We've had schools ask us if we can do the program with the schools as a fee for service. But yeah, with asking about training, not really. I mean, I'm open to, consider fee for service. I particularly like going to Sydney and Melbourne. If there's anybody out there that would like to drop me a line, I'm more than happy to come from a consultation at any time. But yeah, I mean, really, we just used the resource and we made a program around that. Basically just asking kids, like, what do you know? What do you know about yourselves, your family, your community? And just going, okay, well, we don't know anything about that. Let's talk about that. So that's, yeah, it's just, again, going back to, what it's all about is the action and not words, is talking and yarning and listening to the answer.
Thank you, Rachel. Folks, we've got a few minutes left. I might just see if there's any closing remarks that they'd like to share with the room. I think we could talk about this both in terms of, the urgency we've touched on, the actions we can try and take within our organisations or personal lives. But we've got a limited amount of time here today, and I just want to see if there's any closing remarks, call to action, final words you'd like to share with the room.
Well, me to go. Sorry, Bella, it's Murray. I didn't know if he's going to come off mute. Look, from my final words is that, we just have to find room to come together. More now than ever, we need each other. More now than ever, the responsibility must be shared. The truth must be told. Accountability should be always at the forefront of absolutely everything we do. And everybody, myself, my people, we all have a responsibility in this together. I think the biggest message that we can take home is that nobody can be held responsible for yesterday, but we all can be held accountable to tomorrow. And we're all in this together. Aboriginal people, we don't want to be at these foresights. We don't want to be at the forefront of these injustices. I don't. I dislike it. I don't like it. I feel like it's it's not fair. But the reality is it's call for change more now than ever. Let's just not let that be words. Let's let that turn into actions. Let's come together and do something about this as a collective. And let's not point the finger at each other. Let's not gang up on each other. Let's gang up on the issues. And that's my message. Like, let's work out how we can come together and create change, and change for good, because it's more now than ever that we need to do it. And I say that with my hand on my heart because, my parents had to leave their mission at 9-year-old. My mother was, had to be hidden by welfare. We're talking about Sorry Day. That was a couple of days ago. Like, I grew up on the missions. I grew up with families. I grew up in the community. I could easily be a statistic, but I don't sit here and hold people accountable, because it does nothing for my family moving forward. It does nothing for our children moving forward. It does nothing for, the westernised living in today's society. Culture should always be at the forefront of this, and respect should always be at the forefront of it as well. But we have to find a way to come together. We have to find a way for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people to come together, to work together, and to advocate for change. And that's all you'll hear me constantly talking about, because I honestly believe sometimes there is so much separation between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people in the communities, in the workforce, on the football fields, despite whatever it is. There's just always so much separation. We want to talk about change. Let's talk about a collective change, not individual.
I guess I can see we're nearly right on 12. So my closing comment would be, I just really want to give some respect and recognition to our children. That's our children that are in the youth justice system at the moment, in the child protection system. That's the children that we've lost. That's the children that we still have, the children that we are all here for to have this conversation, and more broadly, yes, reconciliation and our people as a collective. But when I talked at the start about education, understanding, bold allyship and connection and belonging, if anybody doesn't have connection and belonging, they will go and find it. And a lot of young Aboriginal children that are in youth justice, if connection and belonging is going out and breaking into a car, or if connection and belonging is going out and doing antisocial behaviour because that gives them community, because their community has been so disadvantaged by our history, and that's what keeps them feeling connected to something. And I talk about this all the time. If we all here in this room didn't connect to our country, if we didn't connect to our home, our family, the car that we drive, the study we do, the work, all of that stuff, if we couldn't find those avenues to connect, I guarantee we all would be in a far worse place than what we are now. And so when we're talking about young children's lives and young Aboriginal children's lives in the system, that's my closing comment, is please just respect that if they don't have connection and belonging, this is a byproduct of our failures, but it's also an incredible opportunity for our future. And that should be at the forefront of the work that we always do when we're working with them.
Sorry, I just wanted to add on to that. Sorry, I know we're going over time. But for anyone who is interested in the Deadly Me program, I'm more than happy to share sort of the basis program that we've worked from, because if we can get this program out to other people, we're basically addressing exactly what Murray just said. And, the proof's in the pudding, like the outcomes that we've gotten from this program, the importance of it, it's just huge. So... But I might need to come to wherever you are for a consultation visit to back it up, though. So
yeah, start booking your flights to WA. Look, folks, we are out of time. Please, everyone, join me in thanking Murray, Rachel, and Shannon. Really appreciate your time and your powerful words today. I do also want to just acknowledge all the community-controlled organisations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and allies working every day in the space, day in, day out, doing amazing things that couldn't join us today and that we didn't have time to recognise. I think I'd really encourage everyone to take with you some of those powerful words, of which there have been many today, around, I think, learning from yesterday, and I think challenge yourself of what will you do tomorrow to take action as part of this and build that connection. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Again, thank you so much to our speakers. It's been an absolute privilege to be with you here today. And I really hope you can take something from this around what tomorrow brings.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Take care. See ya. Thanks for your time.